Case 4. Painting and Sculpting. Ladies and gentlemen, please be aware that the words picture, painting, sculpture or sculpting do not exist in the Quran, but are repeatedly mentioned in the hadiths or traditions. Muhammad plagiarized, pirated and plundered these concepts and ideas and many more from the Torah of the Jews as in the following, and incorporated them in his Sunnah but not the Quran. Exodus 20.2. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for you any engraved images. You shall not bow down yourself to them, nor serve them. Leviticus 26.1. You shall make no idols or graven image, nor erect a pillar, nor shall you set up any image of stone in your land to bow down to it, for I am the Lord your God. God's commands are crystal clear that they forbid the Israelites from creating images or statues, to which they bow down in veneration, because that would be idolatry. As long as they do not venerate their own creations, these commands do not forbid the Israelites from actually painting and or sculpting any form they choose to for decorations and art. It was the rabbis of the Jews who put up rules and regulations forbidding the Jews from painting and or sculpting any forms of humans and animals. Here again were man-made rules imposed upon the believers. Muhammad, the consummate pirate of the desert, plundered these rules from Jewish traditions, not knowing they are not forbidden by God. Sahih al-Bukhari 8.246, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, Allah created Adam in his picture, 60 cubits in height, about 30 meters. The all-knowledgeable Muhammad, the supreme genius of Muhammadan Islam, asserts that Adam was at least 90 feet in height in the image of Allah. The Muhammadan exegetes, to cover up or explain away such an absurd and impossible height, tell us that later generations of his descendants became shorter and shorter until they arrived to the current height. If this were true, one would expect to find thousands of remains of gigantic people. These remains would not only be of skeletons, but should also include tools they used, weapons, artwork, remains of buildings, etc. Furthermore, these findings should show a definite difference in size of people living, let us say, 7000 BC, 3000 BC, and 1000 AD. Since there must have been many such people, archaeologists should have had no problem finding plenty of remains of people that were 80 feet, 60 feet, 40 feet, and 20 feet tall. Where are they? Are there any such findings at all? As far as I know, there is not a single archaeological or biological support for Muhammad's teaching about the changing height of human beings over recorded history. Unerringly, Muhammad was as usual wrong on all counts. Sunan Abu Dawud 227, narrated by Ali bin Abi Talib. Muhammad said, angels do not enter the house where there is a picture, a dog, or a person who is sexually defiled. As I mentioned before, these ideas do not appear in the Quran. Most of the following stories exist only in the traditions. Sahih al-Bukhari 5.235, narrated by Aisha. Muhammad said to Aisha, his child bride, you have been shown to me twice in my dream. I saw you pictured on a piece of silk, and someone said to me, this is your wife. When I uncovered the picture, I saw that it was yours. I said, if this is from Allah, it will be done. Al-Tirmidhi Hadith 6182, narrated by Aisha. Gabriel brought a picture of her, Aisha, on a piece of green silk to Allah's Messenger, said, this is your wife in this world and the next. Muhammad always had the superior rules only for himself. He who condemned pictures saw his would-be child bride on a piece of silk without associating it with Satan. Sahih al-Bukhari 4.570, narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet entered the Kaaba and found in it the pictures of Abraham and Mary. On that he said, what is the matter with the Quraysh? Have they not heard that angels do not enter a house in which there are pictures? This is a monstrous and obvious lie and deception. Since Muhammad prayed in the Kaaba most of his adult life without once mentioning any pictures in it, either in his Quran or in the earlier hadiths until this instant. How is it conceivable that he did not see these pictures before? In fact, Muhammad, the alleged believer in the one and only Allah, prayed all his adult life in the Kaaba with the polytheists while it was a house of idolatry harboring 360 stone gods and goddesses. Case 5. Music, dancing and bells. Ladies and gentlemen, please be aware that the words music, musical, sing, bell, bells, dance, dancing are not mentioned in the Quran but appear in many hadiths about his sunnah. The word singing appears only once in Al-Zummar 39.75. Sahih Muslim Hadith 5277 narrated by Abu Hurairah. Allah's Messenger said, angels do not accompany the travelers who have with them a dog or a bell. Sahih Muslim Hadith 5279 narrated by Abu Hurairah. Allah's Messenger said, the bell is the musical instrument of the Satan. Sahih al-Bukhari Hadith 1.2 narrated by Aisha. Al-Harith bin Hisham asked Allah's Apostle, O Allah's Apostle, how is the divine inspiration revealed to you? Allah's Apostle replied, sometimes it is revealed like the ringing of a bell. This form of inspiration is the hardest of all. Dear listeners, since the bell, according to Muhammad, is the instrument of Satan, it is then no wonder that Muhammad's most difficult revelations were accompanied with the sound of the ringing of bells. Sahih al-Bukhari 2.72 narrated by Aisha. Abu Bakr came to my house while two Ansari girls were singing beside me. Abu Bakr said protestingly, musical instruments of Satan in the house of Allah's Apostle? Sahih al-Bukhari 7.494b narrated by Abu Malik al-Ash'ari, that he heard the Prophet saying, from among my followers there will be some people who will consider illegal sexual intercourse, the wearing of silk, the drinking of alcoholic drinks, and the use of musical instruments as lawful. Allah will destroy them during the night. Once again I have demonstrated how Muhammad's Sunnah is equal to and or superior to the Quran. This is of course not surprising, since both of them were authored, composed and concocted by Muhammad to serve his selfish and depraved purposes. Case 6. Poetry, chess, gold and silk. Although the Quran does not prohibit reciting poetry, playing chess, wearing gold and silk, nonetheless all of them are forbidden to the male Muhammadan Muslims in the Sunnah. Al-Shu'ara 26.224. And the poets, it is those straying in evil who follow them. Al-Anbiya 21.5. Nay, they say he is a poet. Let him then bring us a sign like the ones that were sent to the prophets. Al-Saffat 37.36. And say, what? Shall we give up our gods for the sake of a poet possessed? Sahih Muslim Hadith 5611 narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. We were going with Allah's Messenger, and as we reached Al-Arj, we met a poet who was reciting a poem. Thereupon Allah's Messenger said, catch the Satan, for filling the belly of a person with pus is better than stuffing his brain with poetry. Ladies and gentlemen, be aware that poets supplied the Arabs with their mental and spiritual nourishment, since they memorized the ancestry, deeds, glories and achievements of their tribes, and passed them on to future generations through their students or disciples to keep the records alive. Poets were actually the news media par excellence of Arabia. They were lethal weapons, since a very capable and articulate poet of a small tribe could elevate it in poems to levels greater than that of a much more powerful one. As far as my research has demonstrated, not a single poet during the long period of centuries of the so-called Jahiliyyah, days of ignorance period, that is before Muhammad and Islam, was ever a poet murdered for what he or she recited, unlike what was done by Muhammad and his followers. By the way, there were more female poets among the Jahiliyyah Arabs than during the entirety of 1400 years of Muhammad and Islam. Some of these poets were so formidable that Muhammad had at least 2 of them assassinated because they satirized him. So-called believers and unbelieving kuffar, Muhammad ordered the assassination and slaughter of any Arabian poet who satirized, criticized, or demonstrated that Muhammad was actually a charlatan, a pirate of the desert, and a traitor to his people. He had them butchered invariably at night when utterly unprepared, be they men or women, young or old, free or slave, as amply and very clearly recorded in the Hadiths. Al-Hajj 22.23. Allah will admit those who believe to gardens beneath which rivers flow. They shall be adorned therein with bracelets of gold and pearls, and their garments there will be of silk. Al-Fatir 35:33. Gardens of eternity will they enter, therein will they be adorned with bracelets of gold and pearls, and their garments there will be of silk. Sunan Abu Dawud 422, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, if anyone wants to put a ring of fire on one he loves, let him put a gold ring on him. If anyone wants to put a necklace of fire on one he loves, let him put a gold necklace on him. And if anyone wants to put a bracelet of fire on one he loves, let him put a gold bracelet on him. Sunan Abu Dawud 4226, narrated by Asma. The Prophet said, any woman who wears a gold necklace will have a similar one of fire put on her neck on the day of resurrection. And any woman who puts a gold earring in her ear will have a similar one of fire put in her ear on the day of resurrection. Sunan Abu Dawud 4046, narrated by Ali ibn Abi Talib. The Prophet of Allah took silk and held it in his right hand, and took gold and held it in his left hand, and said, both of these are prohibited to the males of my community. Sahih Muslim 5612, narrated by Buraidah ibn al-Hasib. Allah's Apostle said, he who plays chess is like one who dyes his hand with the flesh and blood of swine. Based upon all the above Muhammadan Muslim sources, quoted by chapter and verse, we can conclude two items. A. Muhammad's Sunnah on several important rules and concepts overrule the Quran. B. It is not anymore a wonder to understand why many of Muhammad's male followers would rather die slaughtering defenseless, unbelieving kuffar civilians than live such a desolate, joyless, and unhappy life. After all, Muhammad promises them eternal, sexual, sensual, and carnal pleasures in his whorehouse version of paradise, being regaled by every single item they were prohibited from in life. This should not be strange to those who have read Muhammad's Quran, because it contains absolutely no joy or happiness, but is full to the brim with hate, war, pain, torture, hell, damnation, discrimination, racism, unhappiness, submission, misery, and stupidity. As I have demonstrated in over 780 unchallengeable chapters on my website of inthenameofallah.org, and my 285 video audios on my blog, that Muhammad's Quran is, to put it in a nutshell, a hate-mongering, war-mongering, racist, and misogynist scripture, and hence utterly ungodly. All of the above can be accessed by simply Googling Al-Rasuli.